Welcome, wanderers. Tonight we leave the safety of streetlights and step into the dark. Not the metaphorical kind, the kind that breathes, that watches, that waits. So light your lantern, quicken your pace, and try to stay in the light. Bray Road isn't marked on most maps. It's a forgotten vein of cracked asphalt winding through the fields outside of Elkhorn in Wisconsin. By day it's nothing, a shortcut maybe, but after sundown, the road changes. The air thickens, the trees lean in, and something begins to stir. The locals don't talk about it much, not directly. They'll say, "Don't drive Bray after dark," but they won't say why. Not unless you ask them. And even then, they'll glance towards the woods before they answer. Because something walks Bray Road, and it doesn't walk alone. The road was empty, save for the car and the dog. Marla Jensen gripped the steering wheel with one hand, the other resting on the cracked vinyl of the door. Her mother's old Pontiac rattled with every bump in the road, the headlights slicing through the October fog like twin blades. The heater coughed lukewarm air, barely cutting the cold that had crept in with the night. Bray Road stretched ahead of her like a ribbon of shadow, flanked by fields of harvested corn, stalks broken and jagged like the ribs of something long dead. And the moon was a pale smear behind a veil of clouds. She was late. Again. Her mother would be waiting, porch light flickering like a warning. But Marla wasn't speeding. Not here. Not on this road. Everyone in Elkhorn knew Bray Road had a reputation. Not the kind you could laugh off, and not the kind you could explain, just a feeling. Like the trees were listening. Like the dark was thicker here. Like something was always just out of sight. Turn the radio dial. Skipping past static and sermons, a preacher's voice crackled through the speakers. And the beast shall walk among you, clothed in the skin of the wolf, but with the eyes of a man. The car jolted, a sickening crunch beneath the front bumper, and Marla's heart leapt into her throat. She slammed on the brakes. The Pontiac skidded sideways, tires shrieking against the gravel. She sat there, breath shallow, staring into the dark. The dashboard lights flickered, the engine ticked, and outside the wind stirred the corn. She opened the door cautiously and the cold hit her like a slap. Sharp, metallic, and wrong. She stepped out, boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. The air smelled of damp earth. And there in the road was a shape. At first she thought it was a deer, or maybe even a coyote. Something she hit while crossing. But as she stepped closer, the shape moved. It didn't scurry, it didn't limp. It rose. Slowly, deliberately, unfolding from the ground like a shadow stretching upright. It was tall. 7 feet at least, maybe more. Its limbs were long. Too long. Ending in hands, or paws, or something in between. Fur clung to its frame in wet clumps, and its chest rose and fell with a low wheezing breath. And then it turned, eyes caught in the headlights, a deep molten orange like coals in a dying fire, and they locked onto her. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to just those eyes. The creature tilted its head, its lips peeled back, revealing jagged yellow teeth. It took a step forward, its claws clicking on the tarmac. The smell hit her. Rot or fur, something coppery and wet. Marla stumbled backward and her heel caught on the gravel. She fell hard, palms scraping open on the stones. And the creature smiled. Not a snarl or a threat, but a smile, almost as if it recognized her. She scrambled to her feet and ran. She couldn't scream, the sound was stuck in her throat, thick and useless. And behind her she heard it moving. Not chasing her, just following. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of town. She didn't tell her mother, and she didn't sleep that night. And she never drove Bray Road again. But sometimes, when the wind was right, she swore she could still smell it, still feel those eyes on her back, still hear the soft, deliberate click of claws on asphalt. The snow had come early that year. By mid-November, the fields outside Elkhorn were already buried in white. The corn was long gone, leaving behind a brittle graveyard of stalks poking through the frost. The sky hung low and grey, pressing down on the land. Sheriff Bill Granger stood at the edge of a pasture just off Bray Road, one gloved hand shading his eyes, the other resting on the butt of his holstered revolver. He wasn't a man given to nerves. 27 years in the department had taught him how to handle drunks, domestic calls, and even the occasional meth lab out in the woods. But this was different. The farmer, a wiry man named Hal, stood beside him, chewing the inside of his cheek and staring at the snow. "It was my best heifer," Hal said. "Found her like this just after dawn. I thought it was coyotes at first." Bill didn't respond. He was crouched beside the carcass, studying the mess. The cow's throat had been torn out, not sliced, but ripped. The snow around her was soaked red, and the blood frozen into crust. Her eyes were wide open and glassy, and her tongue lolled from her mouth like a strip of leather. But it wasn't the body that made Bill's stomach twist. It was the tracks. They circled the cow in a wide arc, deep impressions in the snow, spaced too far apart to be any dog or coyote. Each print was wide, clawed, like a wolf's paw, but longer, narrower, almost human. He followed them with his eyes, and they led from the woods across the pasture to the fence line, and then nothing. No return trail, no blood, just a clean break, as if whatever had made them vanished into the air. Bill stood slowly, brushing the snow from his knees. "And you didn't hear anything?" Hal shook his head. "Not a damn thing. Dogs didn't bark, no lights. Just woke up and found her like this." Bill looked back at the woods. The trees were still. No rustling, no birdsong. Just the wind threading through branches like a whisper. He'd heard the stories, of course, everybody had. The beast, the thing on two legs, but stories didn't leave claw marks this deep. Stories didn't tear through bone like paper. He took a step forward toward the fence and then paused. And there, caught on the barbed wire, was a tuft of fur, dark and coarse. He reached for it and then stopped. Something in his gut twisted. A voice, not his own, whispered, "Don't touch it." He stepped back. "I'll file a report," he said, "but I wouldn't expect much." Hal nodded, eyes still fixed on the carcass. "You reckon it'll come back?" Bill didn't answer him. He didn't want to lie, and he didn't want to tell the truth either. Instead, he turned towards his cruiser, boots crunching through the snow. And just for a moment, he thought he heard something move in the trees. He didn't look back. The Elkhorn Historical Society was quiet, and Dr. Miriam Kessler stepped inside, brushing the snow from her coat, the door's bell jangling like a warning. The air smelled of dust, old paper, and something faintly metallic. She paused, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, flickering in protest. She was here for records. Not stories, not ghosts. Facts. The receptionist was gone, and the front desk was empty. A single lamp glowed in the back corner, casting long shadows across rows of filing cabinets and shelves stacked with brittle folders. Miriam walked slowly, boots echoing the linoleum, her breath fogging in the cold. She found the archive room unlocked, and inside the temperature had definitely dropped. She pulled open a drawer marked Local Folklore, 1930s to 1990s. Her fingers brushed yellowed newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and court transcripts as she scanned the headlines. Local girl claims beast chased her car. Sheriff finds livestock mutilated, no known predator. Witness describes creature with human eyes. And then she found it. A folder just simply labelled Bray. Inside there were sketches, charcoal renderings of a creature hunched and snarling, its limbs too long, its mouth too wide. Descriptions in shaky handwriting, and then a photograph, black and white and grainy. A field and a fence and something in the background. Blurry, but incredibly tall. Miriam's hand trembled. She turned the photo over, and on the back was a date. November 3rd, 1962. E. Kessler. Her grandfather. She stared at the name, her heart thudding. He'd died before she was born. A quiet man. A farmer. No one had ever mentioned Bray Road to her. She flipped through the rest of the folder, a letter typed and unsigned. It doesn't hunt like an animal. It waits. It chooses. If you've seen it once, it's already too late. The lights flickered and she looked up. The room was empty, but the air had definitely changed. She closed the folder and slid it in her satchel and turned to leave. And then she saw it. pressed against the frosted window, just for a moment. Tall, broad, eyes glowing orange. And then it was gone. She didn't run, she walked, slowly and deliberately, because something had followed her here, and it wasn't finished. The road to her grandfather's land was little more than a memory now. A narrow, rutted track swallowed by frost-bitten weeds and the slow, creeping hunger of the woods. Miriam's boots crunched through the snow as she walked, her breath rising in pale clouds that vanished almost as quickly as they formed. The trees on either side leaned inwards, their skeletal limbs clawing at the sky, casting long finger-like shadows. She hadn't been here since she was a child, not since the funeral. The farmhouse was gone now, burned down in the late 90s, they said, though no one could ever explain how or why. All that remained was the stone foundation, half buried in snow, and the rusted skeleton of a windmill that groaned softly in the wind. She paused at the edge of the clearing, the folder from the archive clutched tight against her chest. The photograph of the creature was still inside, along with a letter bearing her grandfather's name. She hadn't slept since she found it, not really. Not with those eyes burned into her mind. Not with the sense that something had followed her home. She stepped into the ruins. The snow here was untouched. No footprints, no tracks. She moved slowly, scanning the tree line, her fingers brushing the low stone wall that once marked the edge of the garden. Her grandfather had been a quiet man, but not unkind. He'd taught her how to whistle with an acorn cap, how to find north by moss and starlight, and he'd told her stories too. Strange ones about lights in the wood, about things that walked like men but weren't, and about the old tree at the edge of the property that no one was to touch. She found it easily. It was still there. The tree stood alone, gnarled and massive, its bark blackened with age and split down the centre like a wound. It was hollow now, had been for decades, but hadn't fallen. Its roots clung to the earth like claws, and its branches reached skyward in a twisted sprawl. Miriam approached slowly, her boots sinking into the snow, and the air grew colder with every step, the wind falling away until even her breath seemed muffled. She reached the tree and placed a hand on its bark, and then from within the hollow, something stirred. Not loudly or violently, just a shift, a breath, as if something had been sleeping, and now it was waking. She stepped back, heart pounding, eyes locked on the darkness within the tree. The wind picked up again, carrying with it a scent, something earthy and faintly metallic, like blood, like something that had been buried too long. And then she heard it, a voice, low and gravelly, not quite human. It said her name, not shouted or whispered, just spoken, as if it knew her, as if it had always known her. She turned and ran. Branches clawed at her coat. Snow flew beneath her boots. The woods blurred around her, but she didn't stop. Not until she reached the car. Not until she slammed the door and locked it with shaking hands. And there she sat, gasping, staring at the tree through the windshield. It hadn't moved, but she knew that deep in her bones that it had watched her go. and somewhere behind the bark and the rot and the roots, something was smiling. The diner on County Road H had been there for decades, its linoleum floors worn smooth by the boots of farmers and truckers and the occasional drifter who didn't know better than to keep driving. The coffee was burnt, the pie was barely passable, and the booths creaked like old bones when you sat down. Sheriff Bill Granger sat in the corner booth, nursing his third cup of black coffee, eyes fixed on the snow outside. He hadn't really slept properly, not since the Rourke farm, not since the tracks. He just kept seeing them over and in his mind. Long clawed impressions in the snow. He'd told himself that maybe it was a bear, but bears don't vanish into thin air and bears don't smile. The bell above the door jingled and he looked up. A woman stepped inside, brushing the snow from her coat. Tall, sharp-eyed, with a satchel slung over one shoulder and a look that said she wasn't here for pie. She scanned the room and spotted him, walking straight over. "You're Granger," she said, not a question. "Depends who's asking." She slid into the booth across from him uninvited. "Dr. Miriam Kessler, folklorist, and I think we need to talk." He studied her for a long moment before asking, "About what?" She reached into her satchel and pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to him. "This." He opened it. The photograph was on top. The same one he'd seen years ago, passed around like a ghost story at the station. A blurry figure in a field. "Where'd you get this?" "Historical Society. My grandfather took it. E. Kessler." Granger blinked. "Your grandfather was Ed Kessler?" She nodded. "You knew him?" "Everyone did," he said. "Quiet man, good farmer. Died in a fire, didn't he?" "That's what they said," Miriam replied. "But I found something else. A letter. He knew about the beast. He warned someone, maybe even himself." Granger leaned back and the booth groaned beneath him. "Do you believe in it?" "I believe something's out there," she said. He didn't laugh, didn't scoff, just stared into his coffee like it might offer him some answers. "I've seen the tracks," he said. "Something tore through a cow like paper." Miriam's hands tightened around her mug. "It's not just livestock." Granger looked up, puzzled. She hesitated and then said, "It was a girl in the archives. 1991. Claimed something chased her car on Bray Road." Granger's brow furrowed. "Marla Jensen. She came in that night, shaking like a leaf. Said she'd hit something. Said it stood up. I figured it was a prank. Kids pulling stunts. But she never drove that road again. And she moved away a year later. She never stepped foot back here." "I think it's connected," said Miriam. "The sightings, the attacks, the tree." She told him about the ruins, the hollow trunk, the voice that spoke her name, the warmth, the sense that something was waiting. And when she finished, the diner was silent. Even the radio had gone quiet, the static fading into a low, pulsing hum. "You're not the first to go looking." but you might be the first it's called back. He looked out the window. The snow was falling harder now, swirling in frantic eddies across the parking lot. And there, just for a moment, he thought he saw a shape at the edge of the woods. He blinked and it was gone. The cruiser rolled down the old track like a hearse, its headlights slicing through the dusk, illuminating the trees that lined the path like mourners. Snow drifted in lazy spirals across the windshield, melting on contact. Inside, the heater wheezed, struggling to keep the cold at bay. Sheriff Granger drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the radio. And Miriam sat beside him, her satchel clutched tight in her lap, eyes fixed on the darkening woods. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. The road narrowed and then vanished altogether, swallowed by the forest. Granger killed the engine. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute, like the world had taken a breath and forgotten how to let it go. They stepped out into the cold. The woods were different now. Not just quiet, but listening. The kind that pressed against the skin, that made the hair on the back of the neck rise without reason. Miriam led the way, her boots finding the path by memory, by instinct. And the hollow tree stood ahead, black against the snow, his twisted limbs reaching skyward. It looked less like a tree now and more like a wound in the world. Something torn open and left to fester. Granger stopped a few paces back. Jesus, he muttered. That thing's long dead. No, said Miriam. It's just sleeping. She stepped forward, drawn to it as if the air itself had hands and they were guiding her. The bark was darker than she'd remembered, wetter as if almost it had been weeping. Granger's hand went to his holster. She said, "It's awake." From within the hollow, something shifted. A breath, a weight, a presence. Granger stepped forward, his boots crunching loudly in the snow. Then a sound. Low, wet, like something dragging itself across damp earth. The wind died, the trees stilled, and from the hollow came a voice. Not spoken or heard, but felt, like a vibration in the bones. You came back. You brought her. Miriam's breath caught in her throat. What do you want? To finish what was promised. The bark split wider. Not cracked, but peeled, like flesh, revealing not wood, but shadow, and not rot, but hunger. And then it stepped out. The beast, taller than a doorway, shoulders hunched, fur slick with snow melt. Its eyes burned like coals, fixed on Miriam, with something between recognition and possession. Granger fired. The shot cracked through the trees, echoing like thunder. The beast didn't flinch. The bullet struck its chest and vanished, swallowed by fur. And it just smiled. Granger fired again and again, until he was empty. And the beast moved towards them. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. Miriam stepped in between them. "Stop," she said. "You don't want him, you want me." The beast paused and nodded. She turned to Granger, eyes wide and shining. "It's in my blood. My grandfather made a pact, I think, and I think I'm the payment." The beast stepped closer. Snow hissed beneath its feet. The air grew thick with the scent of pine and smoke. Miriam didn't move. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the letter and held it up like a shield. "You said it was promised, but he's gone, and I'm not him." The beast tilted its head. The wind picked up, swirling around them, carrying whispers, fragments of voices, of names, of screams. "Then give me another." Its eyes shifted past her and locked on Granger. "No," she said. "Take me." The beast was already fading, melting into the snow, into the trees, into the dark. Miriam collapsed to her knees, the letter falling from her hands, fluttering to the snow like a leaf. Granger knelt beside her. "What the hell was that?" She looked up at him, eyes hollow, and replied, "It's not done. It's choosing." Behind them, the hollow tree stood open, empty, waiting. The woods were darker than they should have been. Not just the absence of light, but the presence of something that swallowed sound and bent the air, that made the trees lean in as if they were listening. Miriam walked ahead, flashlight beam trembling in her hand, and the hollow tree loomed in the distance. Sheriff Granger followed, shotgun slung low, jaw clenched tight. He hadn't spoken since they left the cruiser, nothing to say. They were past warnings now, past reason, past fear. They were here to end it. The snow was fresh and untouched except for the tracks, long, clawed, and impossibly deep, and they led straight to the tree. And waiting beside it, as if summoned, was Marla Jensen. She stood in the clearing like a ghost. Her coat dusted with snow, her eyes wide. She looked older than her years, worn thin by something she carried too long. And in her hand was a rusted crowbar, and the other a silver locket, swinging gently like a pendulum. "I knew you'd come," she said. Granger approached. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the tree. "It's been calling me for weeks. In dreams, in mirrors. I tried to ignore it, I tried to forget. But how do you forget something that's still watching you?" The wind howled, the tree groaned, and from within the hollow came a low growl, like gravel in the throat, and then movement. The bark peeled back and the beast stepped out. It was larger now, taller, its fur slick with shadow and its eyes twin furnaces of memory and hunger. It looked at each of them in turn. Granger, Miriam, Marla, as if weighing them, measuring, deciding. Granger raised his shotgun and the beast just smiled. 3 threads, 1 knot. Its voice was not a sound but a pressure, a vibration in the chest, a taste of iron on the tongue. The pact was broken, the blood was spilled, yet the debt remains. Miriam stepped forward. Marla stepped between them, crowbar raised. You want me. Take me. The beast tilted its head. You were spared. The beast stepped closer, the snow hissing beneath its feet, the trees trembling, and Granger fired. The blast lit the clearing for a heartbeat, then vanished into the dark. The beast staggered, snarled, and then straightened. The wound smoked, but did not bleed. Then it lunged. Marla swung the crowbar and it connected with a sickening crack. The beast reeled, then turned on her, claws flashing. Miriam screamed, reaching into her coat and pulled the locket from Marla's hand, snapped it open. Inside was a photo. A man. A grandfather. And behind him, but barely visible, the hollow tree. She held it high and turned to the beast. He made the pact, but I am ending it. The beast froze. Miriam stepped forward, heart pounding, and she drove the locket into the snow at the beast's feet. No fear, no more silence, and no more sacrifice. The ground trembled and the trees behind them groaned. Its bark splitting wider, light spilling from within, golden and searing. The beast howled, a sound of rage and sorrow and something so close to release. It turned towards the tree and took one step and vanished into the light. The clearing fell silent. The snow began to fall again, covering the tracks and the blood and the locket. Is it gone? Miriam didn't answer. Marla sank to her knees, staring at the place where the beast had stood. I can still feel it, like it left something behind. Miriam looked at the tree. The light was gone, but the wound remained. Maybe it did. The snow melted slowly that year, and by mid-December the fields around Elkhorn were still dusted with white, but the edges had begun to soften, revealing patches of frozen earth and the brittle remains of last season's harvest. The woods were quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after something has passed through. Sheriff Granger sat alone in his office. The folder from the archives spread across his desk like a map of old wounds. The photograph was still there, the sketches, the letter. He didn't sleep much anymore, not since that night, since the clearing. Miriam had left town 2 days after the confrontation. Just a note on his desk. Marla stayed. She rented a cabin near the edge of the woods, just off Bray Road. Said she wanted to face it. She wasn't afraid anymore. But Granger knew better. Fear doesn't just vanish, it settles. It waits. And the town moved on as towns do. The Rourke farm was sold, the diner reopened, the stories faded. But the woods didn't forget. And Marla stood at the edge of the tree line, coat pulled tight, breath fogging in the cold. The hollow tree was gone, split and burned, reduced to ash, but something lingered. She walked slowly, boots crunching on frost, eyes scanning the underbrush. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, just some kind of confirmation, closure, proof that it really was over. And then she saw it. Prints in the snow. Long, clawed, fresh. She knelt beside it, things hovering just above the snow. The air grew colder and the wind stilled, and behind her, a twig snapped. She stood, heart pounding, and stepped back. The print remained, alone and singular. She didn't run, she didn't scream, she simply walked away, but as she reached the road, she heard it. A sound that she hadn't heard in years. Low, wet, a growl. Not close, not far, just waiting. The beast was never just a creature. It was a memory, a pact, a shadow stitched into the very roots of the land. And some shadows don't die. They hibernate. Spring came late to Elkhorn. The snow lingered longer than usual. The woods remained bare, their branches brittle and back against the pale skyline. Miriam never did return. Her name appeared once in the local paper, attached to a lecture she'd given in Madison. Folklore and the flesh, manifestations of the collective mind. Sheriff Granger retired quietly, sold his house, left no forwarding address. Some say he moved south, and others say he didn't move at all, just disappeared. His cruiser found idling at the edge of Bray Road, driver's door open and shotgun missing. Marla stayed, bought the land where the hollow tree once stood, built nothing and planted nothing. She just walked the perimeter each morning, eyes scanning the tree line. But sometimes, when the wind shifted, she would pause, tilt her head and just listen. Because some things don't die. They wait, they watch, they remember. And the road is still there, cracked, narrow and unremarkable until the sun goes down, until it becomes something else. So if you ever find yourself driving down Bray Road after dark, if the wind dies and the trees go still, if you see something in the ditch, don't stop, don't look, and whatever you do, don't get out of the car. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.